What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this: a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times. Each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path: rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him. A working-class man with zero social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mention that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. What if I told you that one cartoon dad has a higher body count than most movie villains? Today we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Peter Griffin and counting every single person this animated maniac has eliminated. Trust me, the numbers are absolutely insane. Most people think Peter Griffin is just a lovable goofball who makes stupid mistakes. But when you actually sit down and track his actions across hundreds of Family Guy episodes, a terrifying pattern emerges. This isn't just some clumsy dad bumbling through life. This is a walking disaster zone who leaves destruction wherever he goes. I spent weeks combing through every Family Guy episode, taking notes, rewinding scenes, and meticulously documenting each incident. What I discovered shocked me. Peter Griffin isn't just accidentally dangerous. He's legitimately one of the most prolific killers in television history. And the worst part? He never faces any real consequences. Let's start from the very beginning with Peter's first confirmed elimination. In only the second episode of the entire series, Peter runs down the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes while driving. Just flattens the poor bird completely. When asked if he hit something, Peter casually dismisses it and keeps driving. That casual attitude toward taking a life, it sets the tone for everything that follows. The very next episode, things escalate dramatically. A tour bus pulls up to the Griffin house, and Peter completely loses his mind. He grabs a shotgun and opens fire on the entire vehicle. 3 people eliminated just like that. His reaction to seeing strangers at his door was immediate violence. No questions asked. No attempt at communication. Just grab a weapon and start shooting. Then there's the hospital incident that really showcases Peter's dangerous incompetence. Somehow this man was allowed to work as a doctor, which should have been a red flag for everyone involved. During what appears to be a routine procedure, Peter's negligence directly leads to a patient's death. The fact that he was even permitted near medical equipment shows a serious breakdown in the system. But Peter's killing spree really picks up steam when he temporarily takes over Death's job. With supernatural powers at his disposal, Peter becomes exponentially more dangerous. He kills 2 airline pilots mid-flight simply by touching them. Thousands of passengers could have died if not for quick thinking from another character who managed to land the plane. Peter's reaction to nearly causing a massive aviation disaster? He jokes about needing mittens. The pattern becomes clear early on. Peter has zero regard for human life and even less understanding of consequences. When tasked with simple babysitting duties, he leaves an infant to drown in a bathtub. His parenting instincts are so fundamentally broken that he can't even keep a baby alive for one evening. Speaking of children, Peter's relationship with kids is consistently disturbing. When he briefly works as a nanny dressed up like Mary Poppins, 2 children end up dead and hidden under a bed. These weren't accidents or misunderstandings. Peter's presence in any childcare situation inevitably leads to tragedy. But the really chilling moments come when Peter turns his violence toward his own family. In one episode, his negligence with home repairs leads to carbon monoxide poisoning that kills Lois, Chris, and Meg. Even though they're miraculously fine in the next episode, Peter's actions directly cause their deaths. A husband and father who accidentally kills his entire family should be traumatized for life. Peter just moves on like nothing happened. The mob-style execution of Brian over some leftover food shows Peter's capacity for cold-blooded murder. When his dog eats his chicken and drinks his cream soda, Peter responds with gangster-level violence. The casual way he eliminates a family member over such trivial matters reveals the true depth of his sociopathic tendencies. Peter's parenting philosophy seems to involve extreme violence as conflict resolution. When his daughter faces bullying at school, instead of speaking to teachers or parents, Peter takes matters into his own hands. The bully doesn't survive the encounter. Later, when presenting what he thinks is the bully's head to his son, Peter admits he got the wrong kid entirely. He murdered an innocent deaf child by mistake and shows no remorse whatsoever. The axe murder of Cleveland represents a turning point where Peter's violence becomes increasingly graphic and disturbing. This isn't cartoon slapstick anymore. This is genuine horror movie material. The casual way Peter wields deadly weapons against friends and neighbors shows a complete break from reality and basic human decency. From this point forward, Peter's methods become increasingly brutal, and his body count starts climbing exponentially. The chainsaw massacres alone account for dozens of victims. Peter goes from house to house like a serial killer, methodically eliminating anyone in his path. The fact that he seems to enjoy this level of violence makes it even more disturbing. One of the most senseless killings involves Peter murdering a child just to steal a jet ski. When his family points out they're literally standing next to their boat, Peter ignores them and commits homicide anyway. This isn't about necessity or even twisted logic. This is pure evil masked as comedy. The restaurant incident where Peter kills a woman named Erica while trying to prove his cooking skills demonstrates how his ego and incompetence create deadly combinations. Peter's need to show off constantly puts innocent people in mortal danger. Peter's involvement in sports inevitably leads to casualties. Every athletic activity he participates in somehow results in someone's death. Whether it's shot put, treasure hunting, or any other recreational activity, Peter transforms harmless fun into lethal encounters. The drunk driving incidents reveal another layer of Peter's criminal behavior. He openly admits to calculating exactly how much alcohol he can consume while still being able to drive. This premeditated approach to endangering others shows Peter knows his actions are dangerous, but simply doesn't care about the consequences. The Boston Marathon Massacre stands out as one of Peter's most heinous acts. Running down dozens of innocent runners during a major sporting event crosses the line from accidental violence into mass murder territory. The casualty count from this single incident rivals actual terrorist attacks. Peter's racism leads to deadly encounters as well. His casual bigotry creates situations where innocent people lose their lives simply for existing in Peter's presence. The anthropology store incident perfectly captures how Peter's prejudices fuel his violent tendencies. When Peter briefly becomes death incarnate, his kill count skyrockets through supernatural means. Having the literal power of life and death in Peter's hands is like giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. The pilots who die simply from Peter's touch represent just the beginning of the carnage. The hospital bombings showcase Peter's evolution into full-scale terrorism. Destroying entire medical facilities because he disagrees with vaccines makes Peter an anti-science extremist willing to commit mass murder for his beliefs. The estimated casualty counts from these attacks reach into the hundreds. Peter's accidental involvement with actual terrorists leads to multiple explosive incidents. His friendship with a terrorist operative results in several bombings throughout the city. Even when Peter tries to do the right thing by helping authorities, he ends up triggering more explosions that kill dozens of innocent people. The secret society incident demonstrates Peter's capacity for large-scale destruction. Burning down an entire facility housing historical documents leads to hundreds of deaths. Peter's inability to consider consequences means every action he takes has the potential for massive collateral damage. The presidential fight with Donald Trump represents the peak of Peter's destructive potential. Their brawl triggers nuclear missile launches that devastate multiple population centers. The casualty count from this single incident reaches into the thousands. Peter literally causes acts of war through his inability to control his temper. But none of Peter's individual acts of violence compare to his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This running conflict has resulted in more deaths and destruction than actual wars. Every encounter between these two characters leaves dozens of innocent bystanders dead. Their first major battle destroys multiple vehicles, causes plane crashes, and brings down entire buildings. The Ferry wheel incident alone accounts for hundreds of casualties as the massive structure rolls through populated areas. Their fights aren't contained conflicts between two individuals. They're citywide disasters that claim enormous numbers of innocent lives. The cruise ship battle represents the most destructive single incident in their ongoing war. When their fight moves into the engine room, they lose control of a massive passenger vessel that crashes into a major city. The resulting destruction levels multiple city blocks and kills hundreds of people. This single incident qualifies as one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Their time travel battle creates paradoxes that threaten the fabric of reality itself. When Peter and Ernie use time manipulation technology to continue their fight across multiple historical periods, they create cascading effects that alter the course of human history. The scientist who created the time machine becomes an early casualty of their temporal warfare. The NASA facility destruction shows how their conflict has escalated beyond Earth itself. Their space battle crashes back to the planet and destroys an ocean oil rig, adding environmental disaster to their already impressive list of crimes against humanity. The reverse time sequence battle creates some of the most confusing and deadly encounters in their entire conflict. When everything starts happening backwards, the destruction becomes even more widespread and incomprehensible. Plane crashes, building collapses, and mass casualties all blend together in a chaotic symphony of violence. When you calculate the total casualties from just the Peter versus Ernie conflicts, the number reaches nearly 1,500 deaths. This means half of Peter's entire body count comes from a single ongoing dispute that started over an expired coupon. The fact that such trivial origins led to such massive destruction perfectly encapsulates Peter's character. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcases Peter's ability to bring his destructive tendencies to other fictional universes. His fight with Homer Simpson levels significant portions of Springfield and adds another 100 casualties to his count. Even when visiting other shows, Peter cannot help but create mayhem and death. Throughout all of these incidents, certain patterns emerge that make Peter's behavior even more disturbing. He shows no remorse for any of his actions. He never learns from his mistakes or attempts to modify his behavior. Most importantly, he faces no meaningful consequences for any of his crimes. The legal system in Peter's universe seems completely incapable of holding him accountable. Despite committing mass murder on multiple occasions, Peter continues to walk free and repeat his destructive patterns. This creates a world where violence has no consequences and human life has no value. Peter's family and friends enable his behavior by treating his mass murder sprees as minor inconveniences rather than serious crimes. When someone consistently kills innocent people, the appropriate response is not to laugh it off and wait for the next episode. The normalization of Peter's violence makes everyone around him complicit in his crimes. The media within Peter's world also fails to adequately report on his actions. Despite causing multiple disasters that should dominate news cycles for months, Peter's crimes are quickly forgotten and life returns to normal. This unrealistic portrayal of consequences sends dangerous messages about accountability and justice. When you add up every death directly attributable to Peter Griffin's actions, the final count reaches approximately 2,800 people. This makes him one of the most prolific killers in entertainment history. For context, this body count exceeds many actual historical mass murderers and rivals casualty figures from major military conflicts. The fact that this level of violence is presented as comedy raises serious questions about desensitization to violence in media. When mass murder becomes a punchline, society loses important moral boundaries that separate acceptable behavior from criminal acts. Peter Griffin represents the logical extreme of consequence-free violence in entertainment. His character demonstrates what happens when someone with destructive tendencies faces no accountability for their actions. The result is escalating violence that eventually reaches genocidal proportions. The most disturbing aspect of Peter's character is how his violence is often portrayed as justified or at least understandable. Whether defending his family, pursuing his goals, or simply satisfying his curiosity, Peter's murderous actions are presented within contexts that make them seem reasonable to viewers. This normalization of extreme violence has real-world implications for how audiences process and respond to actual violence in their daily lives. When fictional characters commit mass murder without consequences, it becomes easier to dismiss real violence as less serious than it actually is. The Peter Griffin phenomenon also reveals how comedy can be used to mask serious social problems. By presenting his violent tendencies as humorous character quirks, rather than serious mental health issues, the show avoids confronting the deeper implications of his behavior. In conclusion, Peter Griffin's body count of 2,800 people makes him one of the deadliest characters in television history. His casual approach to mass murder, combined with the complete lack of consequences he faces, creates a character who embodies the worst aspects of unchecked violence and social irresponsibility. While Family Guy presents his actions as comedy, the sheer scale of death and destruction he causes reveals a character who belongs in prison rather than primetime television. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the most dysfunctional family on television. Today we're talking about something that's been bothering me for years watching Family Guy. Peter Griffin might be an absolute disaster of a human being, but honestly, his wife Lois has pulled some stunts that would make any reasonable person run straight to a divorce lawyer. I'm talking about moments so outrageous, so completely unforgivable, that you'll be questioning how this marriage even survived. We're counting down the 5 most shocking times Peter should have packed his bags and never looked back. Trust me when I say number 1 is going to blow your mind because it involves a certain pop star and some seriously questionable decisions. But before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we've got tons more Family Guy content coming your way. Let's kick things off with number 5. And honestly, this one still makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. Picture this. Lois Griffin, the supposedly devoted wife and mother, decides to have an affair with none other than former President Bill Clinton. Yeah, you heard that right. The President of the United States. Now, I know Family Guy is known for its outrageous storylines, but this one crosses every possible line you can imagine. The whole mess starts when Clinton rolls into Quahog for what's supposed to be an innocent beauty contest judging gig. His presidential limo conveniently breaks down right in front of the Griffin house, and suddenly Peter finds himself starstruck by his new famous friend. At first, it seems harmless enough, just 2 guys hanging out causing minor mischief around town. But then Lois discovers Peter looking absolutely terrible the next morning, and she is not having it, especially when she finds out he brought home a random pig from their adventures. Now, here's where any normal person would just have a conversation with their spouse about boundaries and responsibility. But Lois Griffin is not normal people. Instead of talking to Peter directly, she marches herself over to Clinton's hotel room to give the former president a piece of her mind about corrupting her husband. Big mistake. And I mean astronomically huge mistake. Because the next thing you know, she's completely fallen for Clinton's legendary charm. The situation goes from bad to absolutely catastrophic when Peter walks in to find his wife in bed with the president. Can you even imagine that moment? The betrayal, the shock, the complete destruction of everything you thought you knew about your marriage. Peter literally catches them in the act, and Lois has the audacity to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness like this is just some minor marital hiccup. But here's the part that really gets me. Instead of demanding answers or showing any kind of backbone, Peter just accepts her pathetic excuse and even agrees to her twisted proposal that he can sleep with anyone he wants to get even. The whole situation is so messed up that even when Peter chooses to get revenge with Lois's own mother, the moral compass of this family is just completely broken. What makes this even worse is that this isn't just about physical betrayal, it's about the complete lack of respect Lois shows for her marriage and family. She throws away decades of marriage for a quick fling with a politician and somehow expects everything to just go back to normal. Any self-respecting person would have walked away right then and there, but not Peter Griffin. Moving on to number 4, and this one might actually be worse, because it involves someone who should be completely off limits. Meg's teenage boyfriend, Anthony. Now, I know what you're thinking. Meg actually managed to get a boyfriend. That's shocking enough on its own, but what Lois does next is absolutely unforgivable and frankly pretty disturbing. Anthony seems like a decent kid, probably the first normal person to show any interest in Meg, ever. Peter and Lois are initially thrilled that their daughter finally found someone. But then Anthony makes one innocent compliment about Lois looking like a movie star, and suddenly she's acting like a predator stalking her prey. The whole thing starts innocently enough with Lois just feeling flattered by the attention, but then she completely loses her mind and starts fantasizing about this underage kid. We're talking about a grown woman in her 40s getting worked up over a teenage boy who's dating her own daughter. The levels of wrong here are just astronomical, and it gets so much worse. Lois doesn't just fantasize, she takes action. She literally creates a schedule showing when Peter will be out of the house and when she'll be available. She hands this to a minor, along with details about her personal life that no teenager should ever know about. The predatory behavior is so blatant and disturbing that it's honestly hard to watch. When she finally makes her move and tries to seduce Anthony, the kid is surprisingly into it, which somehow makes the whole situation even more disturbing. But of course, Meg walks in at the worst possible moment and catches her own mother trying to hook up with her boyfriend. The emotional damage this causes to Meg is something that family will probably never recover from. The worst part about this whole scenario is how Lois handles getting caught. Instead of taking responsibility for her completely inappropriate behavior, she manipulates the situation to make herself the victim. She tells Peter that he makes her feel old and ugly, essentially blaming him for her decision to prey on a teenager. And Peter, being the spineless disaster that he is, actually apologizes to her, and the whole thing gets swept under the rug like nothing happened. This right here should have been the end of their marriage. There's no coming back from trying to sleep with your daughter's underage boyfriend. The betrayal of trust. The emotional damage to Meg. The complete breakdown of appropriate boundaries. It's all unforgivable. But somehow Peter just lets it slide, and life goes on as normal in the Griffin household. Coming in at number 3, we have the time Lois discovered gambling and literally bet away the family car at a casino. This one starts innocently enough, with the family taking a road trip to help Chris with his Boy Scout troubles. Peter, being Peter, refuses to ask for directions, even when they're clearly lost, and the situation gets worse when he needs to make an emergency bathroom stop at a Native American casino. While Peter handles his business, Lois finds herself with some free time, and that's when she spots the poker machines. Now, for most people, this would be a harmless distraction, maybe lose a few dollars and move on with your day. But Lois Griffin has zero impulse control, and within minutes, she's completely hooked on gambling. The addiction happens so fast, it's actually frightening to watch. One minute she's just curious about the flashing lights and sounds, the next minute she's feeding money into these machines like her life depends on it. Peter literally has to drag her away from the gambling floor when it's time to leave, but the damage is already done. Lois has caught the gambling bug, and it's about to destroy everything. Here's where the story goes from concerning to absolutely insane. While Peter is distracted, Lois manages to lose the family car in a poker game. She literally gambles away their primary means of transportation, stranding the entire family at a casino in the middle of nowhere. The level of irresponsibility and selfishness it takes to make that kind of decision is just staggering. Peter ends up having to pretend to be Native American and spend a night hungry in the forest just to win back their car through some ridiculous tribal challenge. The fact that he actually pulls this off is a miracle, but that doesn't excuse what Lois did. She put her entire family at risk because she couldn't control herself around some flashing lights and the sound of coins dropping. The gambling addiction reveals something really dark about Lois's character. She's willing to sacrifice her family's security and well-being for the temporary thrill of potentially winning money. This isn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It's a fundamental character flaw that shows she can't be trusted with important decisions. Any reasonable person would have serious doubts about continuing a marriage with someone who would gamble away the family car on a whim. What makes this even more frustrating is that there are no real consequences for Lois's actions. Peter saves the day, gets the car back, and they all go home like nothing happened. There's no discussion about gambling addiction, no acknowledgement of how her behavior could have left them stranded, no recognition that this kind of impulse control problem might be a serious issue in their marriage. Now we're getting to the really disturbing stuff, with number 2, where Lois reads one book about minimalism and completely loses her mind in the most destructive way possible. This episode perfectly captures how Lois tends to take any new idea and push it to absolutely insane extremes without any regard for how it affects her family. The whole disaster starts when Lois discovers a book about decluttering and minimalism. The basic concept is pretty reasonable: getting rid of unnecessary stuff to focus on what truly brings you joy. Most people would maybe clean out a closet or donate some old clothes, but not Lois Griffin. She decides that minimalism means literally throwing away everything and everyone in her life that doesn't spark immediate happiness. The author of this minimalism book claims to have learned these revolutionary insights by meditating on a bridge in Asia, which should have been a red flag that this isn't exactly scientific advice. But Lois is so desperate to find meaning in her life that she latches onto this philosophy like it's going to solve all her problems. What starts as organizing and decluttering quickly escalates to Lois throwing away family belongings without permission. She's making unilateral decisions about what brings the family joy, completely ignoring everyone else's feelings and attachments to their possessions. The lack of consideration for her family's feelings and the authoritarian way she starts controlling everyone's lives is just incredibly toxic. But then Lois takes it to the ultimate extreme and decides that her own family doesn't bring her enough joy, so she kicks them out of the house. Peter, Chris, Meg, Brian, and Stewie all end up living in a storage unit while Lois enjoys her empty minimalist paradise. Can you imagine throwing your own children out of their home because a self-help book told you to focus on joy? This is abandonment of the highest order. The situation gets even more surreal when Lois decides that she herself is clutter and needs to be thrown away. She literally abandons her family completely, leaving behind only a vague note before disappearing entirely. Her husband and children have no idea where she is or if she's even alive. This level of selfish behavior goes way beyond any normal marital problems. It takes Lois falling into an actual garbage barge and nearly drowning in trash for her to realize that maybe throwing away your entire family wasn't the brilliant idea she thought it was. She comes back home babbling about how garbage is wonderful and everything is garbage, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence that she's learned anything meaningful from this experience. The fact that Peter just welcomes her back after she abandoned the entire family shows an incredible lack of self-respect. Lois literally threw away her marriage and her children because a book told her to focus on joy, and somehow that's just something they all move past, like it was a minor disagreement about dinner plans. Finally, we reach number 1, and this is the most disturbing example of all. Lois has a midlife crisis meltdown and ends up trying to seduce Justin Bieber, who at the time was clearly underage. This isn't just inappropriate behavior, this is straight-up predatory and potentially criminal activity. The whole nightmare begins when Lois is feeling down about getting older, and Peter makes everything worse by reading her a birthday poem that basically lists all the ways she's aged and become less attractive. Now, granted, Peter's poem is incredibly insensitive and hurtful, but that doesn't justify what Lois does next. Instead of having an adult conversation about feeling unappreciated, or seeking therapy, or literally any other healthy coping mechanism, Lois decides to have a complete psychological breakdown. She starts dressing like a teenager and acting like she's in high school again, which is already embarrassing enough for a middle-aged mother. But then, things take a turn into seriously illegal territory when Justin Bieber comes to town, and Lois becomes obsessed with meeting him. She shows up at his concert acting like a screaming teenage fan, which is cringe-worthy enough when you're watching a grown woman embarrass herself on live television while her family watches in horror. The situation reaches peak disturbing when Lois actually tracks down Bieber's dressing room and tries to seduce him. She bribes a security guard, gets into his private area, and starts making advances on someone who is clearly a minor. The power dynamic here is incredibly disturbing, an adult woman using her age and experience to manipulate a teenage celebrity. When she tells this underage kid to take his pants off, that's when this crosses the line from inappropriate into potentially criminal behavior. This isn't just a midlife crisis. This is predatory behavior that would absolutely result in criminal charges if this happened in real life. The fact that Peter shows up just in time to stop anything from happening doesn't excuse what Lois was attempting to do. What makes this even more infuriating is how the episode handles the aftermath. Peter and Lois have a heart-to-heart conversation where they both admit to having insecurities, and suddenly everything is forgiven. There's no acknowledgement that Lois literally tried to commit a felony or that her behavior was completely unacceptable under any circumstances. This pattern of behavior throughout all these episodes shows that Lois Griffin is fundamentally selfish, manipulative, and completely unable to take responsibility for her actions. Whether she's cheating with presidents, gambling away family property, abandoning her children, or attempting to seduce minors, she always finds a way to make herself the victim and avoid any real consequences. Peter Griffin might be an idiot, but he deserves better than a wife who consistently betrays their marriage vows, endangers their family, and commits potentially criminal acts whenever she feels a little bit unhappy with her life. Any of these incidents individually would be grounds for divorce, but all of them together paint a picture of someone who is completely unfit to be a wife and mother. The most frustrating part is that Family Guy treats all of this like it's just harmless comedy, when in reality, these behaviors would destroy any real family. Lois Griffin represents the worst possible partner, someone who takes no responsibility, lies, manipulates, and puts her own selfish desires above the safety and well-being of her family. So there you have it, folks. 5 times when Peter Griffin should have absolutely divorced Lois and never looked back. From presidential affairs to attempted felonies, this woman has done things that would end any normal marriage immediately. Let me know in the comments which one of these shocked you the most, and whether you think there are any other Lois moments that deserve to be on this list. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Griffin family dysfunction, and subscribe for more Family Guy content. We've got tons more episodes to break down, and trust me, there's no shortage of material when it comes to this completely insane cartoon family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and you just need something to help your brain wind down? Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some absolutely random facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe of Quahog together. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But something incredible happened that brought it back from the dead. Adult Swim started airing reruns, and the show's popularity exploded like Peter Griffin trying to open a jar of pickles. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they'd made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Family Guy came back from cancellation, making it one of the very few shows in television history to pull off this resurrection trick twice. Speaking of resurrections, here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin's voice. Seth MacFarlane, who voices the intellectual dog, actually based Brian's sophisticated accent and mannerisms on his own personality. MacFarlane has said in interviews that Brian is essentially his voice in the show, which explains why the dog often serves as the voice of reason, at least when he's not having his own ridiculous adventures. It's almost like MacFarlane created his own animated alter ego to comment on the chaos around him. Now here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail, even in its most absurd moments. The Griffin family's address is 31 Spooner Street, and this isn't just a random number pulled out of thin air. The address is actually a reference to the street where one of the show's early writers lived. But what's even more interesting is that if you look carefully at episodes throughout the series, you'll notice that the layout of the Griffin house has changed multiple times. Sometimes there are different numbers of windows, the staircase moves around, and rooms appear and disappear like they're in some kind of cartoon physics experiment. Let's talk about Stewie Griffin for a moment, because this character has one of the most fascinating evolution arcs in animated television. In the early seasons, Stewie was genuinely diabolical, plotting to kill his mother Lois and take over the world with elaborate schemes that would make a Bond villain jealous. But as the series progressed, the writers gradually shifted his character from evil mastermind to sophisticated, cultured, and eventually openly exploring his sexuality. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that this evolution happened naturally as they discovered what made the character funnier and more relatable. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode, the writers were working on it almost a year ago. This lengthy production timeline is part of why the show sometimes feels like it's commenting on events that happened ages ago, but it also explains the incredible attention to detail in the animation and voice work. Did you know that the famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag? The first chicken fight appeared in a Season 1 episode as a quick throwaway joke, but it became so popular with fans that the writers kept bringing it back, each time making the fights longer and more elaborate. These sequences have become some of the most expensive and time-consuming parts of the show to animate, sometimes taking up several minutes of screen time with incredibly detailed action sequences. Speaking of expensive sequences, the show's cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, were actually inspired by classic comedy shows like The Carol Burnett Show. Seth MacFarlane wanted to recreate that feeling of sketches within a larger show, but he took it to the extreme by making the cutaways completely disconnected from the main plot. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've spawned their own merchandise and internet memes. Here's a heartwarming fact about the show's impact on real families. Despite all the dysfunction and chaos of the Griffin family, many real families have said that watching Family Guy together has actually brought them closer. There's something about laughing at Peter's ridiculous antics that makes your own family's problems seem manageable in comparison. The show has become a bonding experience for parents and older children who can appreciate the humor together. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that'll make you listen to the characters differently. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started on the show. She actually lied about her age during the audition process. And by the time the producers found out how young she really was, they were so impressed with her work that they kept her on. She's been voicing Meg for over 20 years now, which means she's literally grown up with the character. Here's something interesting about the show's relationship with censorship. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are actually several episodes that have never aired on television due to content issues. These episodes exist in various forms, sometimes appearing on DVD releases or streaming platforms with heavy warnings. The writers often create content knowing it might be too controversial for broadcast, almost as a creative challenge to see how far they can push the envelope. The character of Cleveland Brown was so popular that he got his own spin-off show, but here's something you might not know about that decision. The Cleveland show was partly created because Mike Henry, who voices Cleveland, wanted to explore what it would be like to have an animated show centered around an African-American family. While the spin-off only lasted 4 seasons, it allowed the writers to tackle different types of stories and social issues than they could in Family Guy. Did you know that several major celebrities have turned down guest appearances on Family Guy because they felt the show was too controversial? But for every celebrity who said no, there were dozens who said yes, often because they were fans of the show themselves. Some of the most surprising guest stars have been people you'd never expect to appear on an adult animated comedy, including several politicians and news anchors who were willing to make fun of themselves. Here's a production fact that shows how much work goes into creating the show's signature style. The animators use a specific color palette that's deliberately muted compared to other animated shows. This choice was made to give Family Guy a slightly more realistic feel, even though the content is completely absurd. The character designs are also intentionally simple, which allows the animators to focus on facial expressions and body language that enhance the comedy. Let's talk about the show's impact on internet culture. Family Guy was one of the first television shows to really embrace social media and online fan communities. The writers regularly read fan feedback and sometimes incorporate popular fan theories or suggestions into actual episodes. This interaction between creators and fans was revolutionary for television at the time and has influenced how many other shows approach their online presence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's educational value. Despite its reputation for crude humor, Family Guy has actually introduced many viewers to classical music, literature, and historical references they might never have encountered otherwise. The show's cutaway gags often reference everything from Shakespeare to classical composers, and many fans have said they discovered new interests because of jokes they didn't initially understand. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has always been interesting, especially since both shows air on the same network. There have been several crossover episodes and references between the shows, but there's also been some friendly rivalry. Seth MacFarlane has always acknowledged The Simpsons as a major influence, but he's also tried to carve out a distinct identity for Family Guy that sets it apart from Matt Groening's creation. Here's a fact about the show's international reach that might surprise you. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted for different cultures around the world. In some countries, certain jokes have to be completely rewritten because the original references don't translate culturally. This has led to some interesting variations where different versions of the same episode can have completely different gags while maintaining the same basic story structure. Did you know that several episodes of Family Guy have been turned into stage productions? There have been live performances of selected episodes at various comedy festivals, with voice actors performing their roles on stage while animation plays in the background. These performances have given fans a unique way to experience the show and have shown how well the writing works, even without the visual component. The show's theme song, which seems simple enough, actually went through multiple versions before the creators settled on the current one. The original pilot had a completely different opening sequence, and there have been several special versions created for holiday episodes and milestone celebrations. The song has become so iconic that it's been covered by numerous bands and has appeared in various other media as a cultural reference. Here's something about the writing process that shows how collaborative the show really is. While Seth MacFarlane created the show and voices several main characters, the writing staff includes dozens of people who contribute jokes, storylines, and character development. Some of the funniest gags in the show come from writers who might never be credited on screen, but whose contributions are essential to the show's success. Let's talk about how Family Guy handles continuity, or rather, how it completely ignores it when convenient. Characters die and come back to life. Relationships change from episode to episode, and major life events are forgotten or contradicted regularly. This approach to storytelling was initially criticized by some viewers who expected more consistency, but it's actually become one of the show's defining characteristics, allowing for maximum creative freedom. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive, including everything from action figures to clothing to home decor items featuring the characters. But here's something interesting. Some of the most popular merchandise features quotes and images from the most controversial episodes, suggesting that fans embrace the show's boundary-pushing content rather than shy away from it. Finally, here's a fact that brings us full circle to why Family Guy works so well as late-night viewing. The show's creators have always understood that comedy is often about timing and rhythm, and they've structured episodes to have natural peaks and valleys of energy. This makes it perfect for falling asleep to, because your brain can follow the familiar patterns even as you drift off, and the comfort of recognizing character voices and running gags creates a soothing background that helps many people relax. As you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are animators working on new Family Guy episodes that won't air for almost a year, writers brainstorming increasingly ridiculous scenarios for Peter to stumble into, and voice actors bringing these beloved characters to life. The world of Quahog continues to evolve and surprise us, proving that even after more than 20 years, there are still new stories to tell and new ways to make us laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious be filled with talking dogs, evil babies, and the gentle chaos of the Griffin family household. Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, Someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrian yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrian Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe crazy ex-girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrien Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrien Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear: Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. Think you know everything about your favorite fictional families? Tonight, I'm about to shatter everything you thought you knew about the characters we grew up watching. What if I told you that beneath the laughs and heartwarming moments, these beloved family shows have been hiding some seriously dark psychological truths? Get ready, because we're diving deep into the twisted minds of television's most iconic families, and trust me, you'll never look at them the same way again. Welcome back to another mind-bending exploration, where we peel back the layers of pop culture to reveal the uncomfortable realities lurking beneath the surface. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on a journey that will fundamentally change how you view family dynamics on screen. We're not just talking about quirky character traits or funny running gags here. We're exposing genuine psychological disorders, toxic behaviors, and dysfunctional patterns that would make any therapist's notebook overflow with red flags. Have you ever wondered why certain family sitcoms feel so uncomfortably familiar? Why we laugh at situations that, in real life, would have us calling social services? That's because these shows, intentionally or not, mirror the darkest aspects of human psychology wrapped in a comedic package. Tonight, we are unwrapping that package and examining what's really inside. Let's start with something that might shock you about animated families. You know those characters we quote daily and consider harmless entertainment? Well, they're actually perfect case studies for some of the most destructive personality traits known to psychology. Take the concept of narcissistic behavior patterns, for instance. We see characters who consistently put their own desires above family welfare, manipulate situations to benefit themselves, and show zero empathy for others' suffering. Consider how often we witness parents in these shows making decisions that directly harm their children's emotional development. They dismiss their kids' feelings, mock their aspirations, and create environments where psychological safety doesn't exist. Yet we laugh because it's presented as comedy. The truth is, if these behaviors occurred in real families, we'd recognize them as forms of emotional abuse. But the darkness goes deeper than individual character flaws. These shows often normalize dysfunction by presenting it as typical family life. Children viewers internalize these relationship patterns as normal, potentially carrying these toxic blueprints into their own future families. It's a cycle that perpetuates unhealthy dynamics across generations, all disguised as entertainment. Let's examine the phenomenon of scapegoating within fictional families. There's almost always that one family member who bears the brunt of everyone else's dysfunction. They become the emotional dumping ground, the target of ridicule, and the convenient explanation for all family problems. This character serves as the family's pressure valve, allowing other members to avoid confronting their own issues by projecting everything onto this unfortunate soul. What's particularly disturbing is how these scapegoated characters are often portrayed as deserving their treatment. The show's narrative subtly suggests that their suffering is justified, teaching audiences that certain people are acceptable targets for cruelty. This psychological manipulation is incredibly sophisticated and deeply harmful, especially when absorbed by impressionable viewers. Moving on to another dark pattern, we see frequent examples of emotional manipulation disguised as parental love. Characters use guilt, shame, and conditional affection to control family members' behavior. They withdraw love as punishment and offer it as reward, creating anxious attachment patterns that would haunt real children for life. The scary part is how these manipulation tactics are often presented as caring parental behavior. Financial dynamics in these fictional families also reveal disturbing truths about power and control. Money becomes a weapon used to maintain dominance hierarchies within the family unit. Characters leverage financial dependency to strip away others' autonomy, creating situations where family members must choose between self-respect and survival. This economic abuse rarely gets labeled as such within the show's context, but it's a form of domestic violence nonetheless. Then there's the normalization of substance abuse as a coping mechanism for family stress. Characters regularly turn to alcohol or other substances to deal with their dysfunctional relationships, and this behavior is consistently portrayed as acceptable or even admirable. The message sent is that chemical numbing is preferable to addressing underlying problems, a philosophy that has destroyed countless real families. The violence, both physical and emotional, that permeates these shows is staggering when you really analyze it. Characters assault each other, destroy property in fits of rage, and engage in psychological warfare that would traumatize actual family members. Yet because it's animated or comedic, we're conditioned to view this violence as harmless fun rather than recognizing it as abusive behavior that mirrors real-world domestic violence patterns. What about the complete absence of healthy conflict resolution in these families? Disagreements escalate to explosive confrontations. Problems get swept under the rug rather than addressed, and family members hold grudges that span entire seasons. There's never any genuine communication, compromise, or emotional growth. Instead, conflicts either explode into chaos or get ignored until they fester into something worse. The gender dynamics in these shows often perpetuate harmful stereotypes that reinforce toxic relationship patterns. Male characters are frequently portrayed as bumbling, emotionally unavailable, and incapable of basic actions. Adulting skills. Female characters often become long-suffering martyrs who enable bad behavior while sacrificing their own needs. These portrayals normalize codependency and emotional labor imbalances that plague real relationships. Let's talk about the children in these fictional families, because their treatment is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. They're often parentified, forced to take on adult responsibilities while their actual parents remain childlike. They become emotional caretakers for dysfunctional adults, a role reversal that stunts their development and robs them of childhood innocence. The shows present this as maturity or responsibility, but it's actually a form of childhood emotional abuse. The sibling dynamics portrayed are equally problematic, characterized by intense competition, jealousy, and cruelty. Siblings are pitted against each other for parental attention and approval, creating lifelong rivalries rather than supportive bonds. The message conveyed is that family members are competitors rather than allies, fostering an environment where trust and cooperation become impossible. Privacy and personal boundaries are consistently violated in these fictional families. Characters rifle through each other's belongings, eavesdrop on private conversations, and invade personal space without consequence. This normalized boundary violation teaches viewers that family members don't deserve privacy or respect, setting up expectations that healthy relationships cannot meet. The way mental health issues are handled in these shows is particularly troubling. Characters displaying clear signs of depression, anxiety, or other psychological conditions are mocked rather than supported. Their struggles become punchlines rather than opportunities for compassion and understanding. This portrayal stigmatizes mental health challenges and discourages seeking help. Perhaps most disturbing is how these shows handle consequences for toxic behavior. Characters rarely face meaningful repercussions for their harmful actions. They might receive temporary comeuppance, but by the next episode, they're back to their destructive patterns without any real change or growth. This lack of consequences suggests that toxic behavior is acceptable as long as you're family. The enablement that occurs within these family systems is staggering. Instead of holding destructive family members accountable, other characters make excuses, cover up problems, and adapt their own behavior to accommodate dysfunction. This teaches viewers that enabling is loving, and that challenging toxic behavior is disloyal, perspectives that trap people in abusive relationships. Financial irresponsibility is often glorified in these shows, with characters making impulsive decisions that endanger their family's security. Yet there are rarely long-term consequences for these choices, sending the message that financial stability is unimportant and that someone else will always clean up the mess. This attitude contributes to cycles of poverty and instability in real families. The constant chaos and unpredictability in these fictional homes would be traumatic for real children. There's no stability, security, or peace. Instead, children live in environments where they never know what crisis will erupt next, what mood their parents will be in, or whether their basic needs will be met. This chronic stress would cause lasting developmental damage in reality. What's particularly insidious is how these shows use humor to make abuse palatable. When terrible behavior is packaged as comedy, our psychological defenses are lowered. We laugh at situations that should horrify us, gradually becoming desensitized to toxicity. This comedic reframing is a powerful tool that makes dysfunction seem normal and acceptable. The isolation these fictional families experience from healthy outside relationships is another red flag. They rarely maintain friendships or connections with functional people who might challenge their toxic patterns. This isolation prevents reality testing and allows dysfunction to flourish unchecked, much like how abusive relationships cut victims off from support systems. The power dynamics within these families are often rigidly hierarchical and authoritarian rather than collaborative and democratic. Decisions are made by whoever has the most power, regardless of how those decisions affect other family members. This teaches children that relationships are about dominance and submission, rather than mutual respect and partnership. Educational neglect is rampant in these fictional families, with parents showing little interest in their children's learning or development. Academic achievement is either ignored or mocked, extracurricular activities are dismissed as unimportant, and intellectual curiosity is discouraged. This attitude toward education perpetuates cycles of underachievement and limits children's future opportunities. The way these shows handle emotions is deeply problematic. Genuine feelings are ridiculed, emotional expression is punished, and vulnerability is treated as weakness. Family members learn to suppress their authentic selves to survive, creating fake personas while their true needs go unmet. This emotional suppression leads to profound psychological damage over time. Perhaps most tragically, these fictional families never model what healthy relationships actually look like. Viewers, especially children, don't see examples of mutual respect, effective communication, genuine affection, or supportive problem solving. Without these positive models, they lack blueprints for creating healthier relationships in their own lives. The normalization of chaos as family life is perhaps the most damaging message these shows convey. They suggest that dysfunction is inevitable, that all families are messed up, and that toxic behavior is just part of human nature. This fatalistic view prevents people from recognizing that healthy families do exist and that change is possible with effort and commitment. As we wrap up this disturbing journey through the psychology of fictional families, I want you to consider how these portrayals might have influenced your own expectations about family life. Have you normalized behaviors in your own relationships that you wouldn't accept from strangers? Have you laughed off red flags that deserved serious attention? Have you repeated patterns you learned from these shows without questioning their healthiness? The power of media to shape our understanding of normal is immense, and these family shows wield that power irresponsibly. They present dysfunction as entertainment, while failing to acknowledge the real pain such behaviors cause in actual families. By recognizing these patterns, we can begin to break free from toxic blueprints and create healthier relationships. Remember, just because something is common doesn't make it healthy. And just because something makes us laugh doesn't mean it's harmless. Real families deserve better than the chaos and cruelty we've been taught to accept as normal. You deserve better. Your future family deserves better. If this analysis has opened your eyes to patterns in your own life, consider seeking support from mental health professionals who can help you develop healthier relationship skills. Remember that recognizing dysfunction is the first step toward healing, and that breaking cycles of toxicity is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and future generations. What did you think of this deep dive into the dark psychology of fictional families? Did any of these patterns surprise you? Or did they confirm suspicions you already had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges the narratives we've been fed. Until next time, stay curious, Stay critical, and most importantly, stay committed to creating healthier relationships than the ones we see on screen.
Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, and somehow clawed its way back from television death each time? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre world behind one of the most controversial animated shows ever created. And trust me, the stories I'm about to share will blow your mind. From secret celebrity cameos that never made it to air, to the shocking real-life inspiration behind Stewie's character, we're uncovering Family Guy secrets that even die-hard fans have never heard before. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how close we came to never having Family Guy at all. Back in 1999, when Seth MacFarlane pitched his idea to Fox executives, he was so broke he was literally sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. The pilot episode cost over $2 million to produce, making it one of the most expensive animated pilots in television history at that time. And here's the kicker. Fox almost passed on it completely because they thought it was too similar to The Simpsons. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has a background that's absolutely fascinating and explains so much about the show's unique humor. He actually started working in animation when he was just 18 years old, creating a thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design that would later become the blueprint for Family Guy. That student film, which you can still find online today, featured early versions of Peter, Lois, and their dog Brian, though they looked quite different from what we know now. What most people don't realize is that MacFarlane does the voices for 4 main characters on the show. He's not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. The interesting part is how he developed each voice. Peter's voice was inspired by a security guard MacFarlane knew who had a thick Rhode Island accent. Brian's voice is essentially MacFarlane's natural speaking voice, while Stewie was originally supposed to sound like Rex Harrison from My Fair Lady, though it evolved into something completely different over time. Speaking of Stewie, here's something that might surprise you. The character was initially written as a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that Stewie's sexuality was deliberately kept ambiguous for years, and the writers would often joke about it in the writer's room. The character's development into a more complex, often effeminate genius baby happened gradually over several seasons, and it wasn't planned from the beginning. The show's relationship with censorship has been absolutely wild from day one. There's an entire archive of Family Guy scenes that were deemed too controversial for broadcast television. One episode had a joke about the September 11th attacks that was removed before airing, and another had a sequence involving Mickey Mouse that Disney's lawyers shut down faster than you could say copyright infringement. The writers have always pushed boundaries, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. Here's where things get really interesting. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox executives thought that was the end of it. But something unprecedented happened in television history. The show found a massive second life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming block. The DVD sales were so strong that they actually outsold many primetime dramas that were still on the air. This success story became a case study in how a show could resurrect itself through alternative distribution methods. The fan campaign to bring the show back was unlike anything television had seen before. This was before social media as we know it today, so fans organized through message boards, early blogs, and even physical petitions. They sent thousands of letters to Fox executives, and some fans even sent baby bottles and diapers as a reference to Stewie. The campaign worked, and in 2005, Family Guy returned for a 4th season, making it one of the first canceled shows to be revived due to fan demand and DVD sales. But then lightning struck twice, and the show was canceled again in 2002 and brought back again in 2005, making it the first show in television history to be canceled and revived twice. This second cancellation and revival story is even more dramatic than the first. The show's ratings had dipped during its 3rd season, and Fox executives felt it had run its course. However, the DVD sales for the first 3 seasons were so astronomical that they couldn't ignore the numbers. The voice acting process for Family Guy is absolutely fascinating and different from most animated shows. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, the main Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates a more natural flow of dialogue and allows for improvisation that you can sometimes hear in the final episodes. Seth MacFarlane has said that some of the funniest moments in the show came from spontaneous interactions during these group recording sessions. One of the most mind-blowing facts about the show involves the famous chicken fight scenes between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes, actually cost more to animate than entire episodes of some other animated shows. The animators have to create detailed fight choreography, multiple background locations, and complex character movements. McFarlane has joked that these scenes are his way of burning through the show's animation budget in the most entertaining way possible. The show's cutaway gags, which are basically mini-sketches that interrupt the main storyline, weren't originally part of the show's format. They were added during the second season as a way to incorporate more jokes and references that didn't fit naturally into the main plot. These cutaways became so popular that they essentially became the show's signature style, influencing countless other animated comedies that followed. Family Guy has had some absolutely incredible celebrity guest stars over the years, but many people don't know about the ones who almost appeared but didn't. Michael Jackson was reportedly interested in doing a voice on the show in the early 2000s, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Similarly, several A-list actors have recorded guest appearances that were later cut from episodes due to various reasons, from scheduling conflicts to content concerns. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy references and memes have become part of everyday internet language. Phrases like, "that really grinds my gears," and "giggity" have entered the cultural lexicon. The show has been referenced in academic papers about humor, animation, and cultural commentary. Some universities have actually used Family Guy episodes as case studies in media studies courses. Here's something that might keep you up thinking about it. The show has predicted several real-world events with uncanny accuracy. There's an episode from 2005 that jokes about Kevin Spacey in a way that seems eerily prescient given later revelations about the actor. Another episode made jokes about certain political figures that seemed outlandish at the time but became remarkably relevant years later. Whether these are coincidences or the writers having incredible insight into human nature is up for debate. The international versions of Family Guy are absolutely wild and worth exploring if you're curious about cultural adaptation. The show has been dubbed into dozens of languages, and each version has had to navigate different cultural sensitivities and humor styles. The German version, for example, had to completely rewrite many jokes because direct translations didn't make sense or weren't funny in that cultural context. Some countries have banned certain episodes entirely while embracing others. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has been fascinating to watch evolve over the years. Initially, there was definitely some tension, with Simpsons creator Matt Groening making pointed comments about Family Guy being derivative. However, this led to one of the most brilliant crossover episodes in animated television history, where the two families actually met and interacted. The production of this crossover episode required unprecedented cooperation between two different animation studios and networks. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates differently from most television shows. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, with the understanding that most of these will never make it to air. This competitive atmosphere has created some of the show's most memorable moments, but it's also led to some jokes that had to be completely rewritten or abandoned during the production process. The show's approach to social and political commentary has evolved significantly over its run. Early episodes were primarily focused on absurd humor and pop culture references, but later seasons began incorporating more direct political satire and social commentary. This evolution has been both praised and criticized, with some fans preferring the original format and others appreciating the show's willingness to tackle serious topics through humor. McFarlane's decision to step back from day-to-day involvement in the show after several seasons was a turning point that many fans noticed. His reduced involvement allowed other writers and producers to put their stamp on the show, leading to subtle but noticeable changes in humor, style, and character development. This transition period created some of the most experimental episodes in the show's history. The merchandising empire that Family Guy has built is absolutely staggering. From action figures to clothing lines, from video games to board games, the show has spawned an entire industry of products. Some of the most interesting merchandise includes items that reference the show's most obscure jokes, suggesting that the creators understand their audience's deep knowledge of the series. As we wind down our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's worth reflecting on how this show that almost never existed became such a cultural phenomenon. From sleeping on couches to creating a multi-million-dollar franchise, from cancellation to resurrection, from controversy to cultural impact, Family Guy represents something unique in entertainment history. The show continues to evolve and surprise audiences, and who knows what wild facts we'll be sharing about it in another 20 years. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably working on another joke that will either make you laugh until you cry or shake your head in disbelief. Possibly both at the same time.